We'll start this podcast very shortly. Unfortunately, we've just been hit with a third 10-second time penalty. Welcome back to Motorsport 101. Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 551 of Motorsport 101. I'm your friendly neighborhood host, Dre Harrison. Glad you could join us as ever. Another doubleheader, another couple of rounds of F1-related chaos. Mexico wasn't the greatest of F1 Grand Prix, we're not going to lie to you, but certainly newsworthy. If we all thought that Austin was just going to be taken lying down, let's just say Max Verstappen took an old page out of the Daft Limmy book of don't back down, double down. And that's how we got the Mexico Grand Prix. Oh, which, by the way, Carlos Sainz won. Just in case you were wondering. But that's once again, Ferrari winning a Grand Prix has become the second story here, which is just really unfair for a team that is literally mounting a serious World Constructors Championship campaign. But here we are. Joining me to make sense of a pretty wacky 10 days or so in the world of F1 is Mr. RJ O'Connell. How's it going, RJ?
I'm still bewildered that Formula One put Max Verstappen on a mugshot to announce his outstanding 20-second penalty during the race.
Was he holding up a sign that said "Wanted, alive or dead" with a bounty fee underneath?
No, just putting his head over like one of those like height meters that like measure how tall the perpetrator is.
Mm-hmm.
20 seconds, Max Verstappen, outstanding penalty. Whoever was on the button for that in the graphics department at the TV truck, hats off to you. You are one of the heroes of the weekend, besides, McLaren reserve driver Pat O'Ward, who came into a hero's welcome despite nobody really knowing who he is.
I was like, I can't believe, I said to myself during the weekend, I can't believe McLaren put a complete random Mexican stranger in the F1 car for a practice session. It's incredibly generous of them. I mean, fair play to them. Maybe one day we'll figure out who he is.
Maybe it'll be so incredible that this will actually bully IndyCar to reopening negotiations for the Mexico City Grand Prix for race.
It really does feel like bullying at this point. It's like,
hashtag bullying works.
Sit down. I was like, you guys say, I'm punching my fist. Like, sit down and negotiate that Mexico City race for 2026, you motherfuckers. Come in.
They could double dip with Interlagos too if the rumors are true. We'll see. We've been disappointed before, but this is not an IndyCar podcast. We got to wait a couple months for that. This is Formula One in Mexico City.
It was indeed. And we have to talk about all the driving standards bullshit, as I like to call it, that we've had to go through before, during, and after the race weekend. Breaking down how, again, this is a very multi-layered, multifaceted story as we break down, the rules of engagement, again, so to speak, between Max Verstappen and Lando Norris as the title fight took another strange turn. We'll have to see how that goes. We'll talk about Ferrari, who, again, won free fastest lap, and with Oscar Piastri down the field, the constructors' gap cut down to just 29 points with 4 to go. Ferrari, are they genuinely got a shot here? Could this actually happen? We'll break that down. Also, a fair amount of cleanup as well. Liam Lawson, Sergio Perez, Franco Colapinto to RB, potentially? Question mark? All of that and much more over the next hour or so. But places you can find us real quick. We're on youtube.com/motorsport101. We're on facebook.com/motorsport101. We're on Twitter at the motorsport_101. If you want to follow us personally on Elon Musk's failed business investment, you can at Dre Harrison 101 and at RJ O'Connell. Both our usernames on Blue Sky if you're more of a Blue Sky thinker yourself. Although, get rid of the 101 for me. It's my literal name, Dre Harrison. You can follow us on there too if you're that way inclined. Also, you can follow us on our website, Motorsport 101, if you want some bonus written content on both races this weekend, this one and MotoGP's Grand Prix of Thailand. And they've only just got rid of all that moisture, all of that rain that came down on Sunday morning and the dramatic but not so dramatic turn on their title race as well. We'll get into that next time out as well. And of course, if you're really lucky, you can back us financially on Patreon, patreon.com/motorsport101. $5 gets you early access to all of our content. You can upgrade to the $10 tier so we can listen to these episodes live as they're being recorded. And that's what Jason's doing right now in our chat. Thank you, Jason, for your ongoing support as well. Much appreciated as ever. Right, without further ado, let's get into Formula One's Mexico Grand Prix right after this.
Folks, in the Mexico City Grand Prix, it does us no pleasure, or maybe all the pleasure in the world, depending on your vantage point, to tell you that it happened again. A week after we had to push Ferrari to second story status after a Max Verstappen and Lando Norris title flashpoint, we got another one a week later. Something London buses. We fast forward to lap 10 of the Mexico City Grand Prix with Max Verstappen running in second and Lando Norris trying a lunge around the outside of turn 4. Verstappen runs Norris off the road. Lando cuts back across the grass to take the position. Max then tries again at turn 8, running off the track intentionally to get the position. The stewards did not take highlight of the actions this time, hitting Max with 10-second time penalties for both infractions and 2 penalty points for the turn 4 incident. Lando Norris would go on to finish second. Verstappen would finish in 5th. That reduced Max Verstappen's championship lead down to 47 points. Oh boy. Oh boy. Lot to talk about this one.
Yeah, I think it's probably best we go from the top of this weekend because there was another little wrinkle in this that started out on Thursday. And I remember this because for those who don't know, if you follow Autosport, you'll know that we do video coverage of the 4 days of a race weekend. I handle the audio version of those videos. And apparently, just as everybody was about to leave the media center on Thursday night, thinking our day's over, we got the press conference, got media days done, we've got our stories written, we're going to go home back to our hotels and Airbnbs. McLaren announced they're launching a right to review into what happened in Austin, trying to get Lando Norris's 5-second time penalty overturned.
Now, hold on, Dre. These reviews don't usually go so hot because usually you have to have brand new evidence that has not been considered prior to them rendering the initial verdict. So what was the brand new evidence that McLaren presented in this case?
I'm glad you asked, Mr. O'Connell. The brand new evidence was ... the verdict itself, which I must admit, that's a new one for a right to review. They are normally ridiculous. I think the overall hit rate of the right to review in recent years is about 2 of 9 or something crazy like that. I think the only ones I can remember were the Alonso-Haas feud in COTA a couple of years ago over Alonso's car leaving in a dangerous state when he got launched by Lance Stroll. And I think the other one was, again, Alonso at Saudi Arabia last year when they were like, oh, can you touch the car on a served penalty or not? Basically. The new evidence was the verdict itself because McLaren claimed you've set a precedent here because Lando Norris was so far in front going into turn 12 at Austin that at that point he was now the defender of the corner rather than the attacker. And apparently that changes the rules of engagement in McLaren's mind because entering the turn 12 braking zone in Austin on that infamous runoff, they reckon Lando was so far in front that Max was actually the aggressor rather than Lando, because obviously Lando was trying to overtake from behind originally. This was quickly thrown out. Oh, okay, I don't say quickly. This took 6 hours. Apparently, because they also got the drivers together for a drivers' meeting, and apparently there was some tension in the room because they almost unified drivers' paddock pretty much said, you need to change the wording on this rule. This is getting ridiculous, which the FIA would agree to. They are changing the text. in regards to their overtaking guidelines you may have seen do the rounds on social media and with the big news players and all that. They've never released it publicly, but everybody's seen a copy and gotten a hold of it, and it's done the round so much it might as well be like a secret email club at this point. Last time that happened, somebody got sued. Anyway, it was one of those things where, essentially the text got changed, or will be changed in the future, but McLaren's right to appeal was thrown out.
It almost reads like, somebody writing down in their homework. They get a question. It's like, explain your work. And they wrote, because it is. Okay, maybe it's not quite that basic, but like it has like
it felt like
vibes. Felt a little bit like it.
It's a funny thing about it as well, just to move on before RJ, is that Andrea Stella himself, after Austin, said there was a good chance it was getting thrown out. It's why he wasn't even considering a right to review, because like, there's no way this sticks. I suspect Zach may have had may or may not have had a hand in this. I'm just
you think it's like a coach is just like, I got this challenge flag in my back pocket. I really don't want to throw it because I'm not sure that this is actually a catch, but Jerry Jones up there thinks it's a catch, so I guess I'm throwing it.
Yeah, it's like the famous video of Rams coach Sean McVay and the coach that has to pull him away from the sideline every time, and he's thrown the challenge flag on McVay's behalf. That's what that felt like. But yes, it was thrown out. Now, fast forward to the race itself. Carlos Sainz started out from pole position. His two forces up to good enough for pole position, so good for him. Sainz dominated qualifying. Max somehow got on the front row by comparison. Takes the early lead with the whole shot as well, because he's just got a far better start than Sainz did. Sainz quickly counterattacks a lap after the early safety car. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then it's Norris's turn to attack. Now, Norris on lap 10 goes for a move around the outside of turn 4. It's a ballsy maneuver, but you can see the logic. Stick enough of your car alongside, you get the outside, you switch back to the inside for turn 5. Max runs Lando off the road again. In a braking contest, Max uses the entire track to defend himself. Norris cuts across the turn 5 grass, rejoins in front of Max. Now, this is important. He rejoins in front of Max to take what was second place on the road by then, or third place, because Charles Leclerc has already passed the pair of them because of their silly driving again. And then, go on, RJ.
Yeah, it's so, and the context, the added context is that both of them are within DRS range of Carlos Sainz. Like, the win is not out of the question for either of these two drivers, and Leclerc is pouncing on them both. Verstappen takes a very wide line through turn 4, let's just say. There's a bit of contact, nothing too huge, but Norris and Verstappen gather it back up. Leclerc is still sitting right behind him as they enter that chicane complex. And then Verstappen runs Norris off the road. They both go off. Leclerc slips past them both. And as a result of that exchange, yes, Verstappen gets the 2 penalty points, but Norris is stuck behind Verstappen pretty much the rest of that opening stint of the race and has no chance to catch Sainz in the battle for the win.
Yeah, if you're Max Verstappen, mission accomplished.
You sick fuck.
You did enough to postpone Lando's charge through the first 20 or so laps of that race, so that by the time Norris gathers it back together, goes onto the hard compound for the final stint of the race, he runs out of time. He's able to get Charles Leclerc late on. Charles makes a mistake at the final corner, and he very nearly loses. It takes a Marc Marquez-level save on the final corner not to be in the wall on that final corner. He
almost had an IndyCar super speedway crash at the banking.
Hellacious tank slapper coming out of the final corner, somehow saved it. But Lando gets him for second, and he is the fastest man on track at the end of the race, but it's a 5-6 second gap to Carlos Sainz by then, and Sainz is able to manage it home at that point. And then, so as mentioned, Leclerc wins, Norris second, Leclerc in third. I actually made a mistake in the script. I should apologize. Max was sixth in the end after the time penalties were shaken out. He served all 20 seconds in the pit lane because it's no longer optional to leave it till the end of the race. So yes. Now, I don't want to spend too much time dwelling on this because for me, these two were slam dunks for Max. Like, this was... I don't like the way Max is racing people. I've never liked the way Max has raced people. And the thing with Max is he knows exactly what he's doing. It's like you can't feign innocence like he did with Lewis Hamilton to a degree, right? You could maybe make an argument that because the first real flashpoint between Hamilton and Verstappen in 2021 was Silverstone, where Hamilton, by hook or by crook, put Max in the wall at 50 Gs, maybe you can make a case that Max just didn't trust Lewis after that.
He didn't make that lunge in the cops trying to take Max Verstappen out of the race, but it was also a very, very low percentage move that required a level of commitment that just it couldn't be pulled off. And that shit just happens.
And we all know that Max and Lewis both raced each other differently after that.
Remember Saudi Arabia?
Well, Saudi Arabia, Brazil is one of the ones I always bring up because Brazil was Brazil was a carbon copy later on. That was what we got within Austin. And of course, Abu Dhabi, where Max ran Lewis 4 wheels off at turn 1 on the opening lap of Abu Dhabi. Lewis cuts the corner to gain an advantage, and then the stewards let it go. This is one of those things where I like to tell people about 2021. Verstappen wasn't the only aggressor in that feud. It wasn't as simple as that, quite frankly. But anyway, that's a discussion for another day. Point I'm getting at here is that we know what Max is capable of. We know that he will run people off the road and claim ownership of the entire track to defend himself if necessary. And he's done it again here. And like I said, he didn't back down after Austin. He doubled down. And
I don't have to like it, but I respect the commitment, man.
I don't like it either, but I need to point out, like, if Max Verstappen's going to win this championship, he's going to have to conjure up the dark arts again. Because I joked going into this weekend, the required run rate for Norris to win this championship was going into this round was 11.4. He only took 10 points out of Max's championship lead this weekend with these because Norris didn't get fastest lap. Charles Leclerc took it at the end of the race. So that was actually below par for Lando. It's gone up to 11.75 now. For Max, it's mission accomplished because that Red Bull car was not good. And that's what Max was more concerned about after the race, and rightly so, because the back end of that race, he was going slower than the Hasses that were behind him. Like, Kevin Magnussen was quicker than him on the hard compound tyre towards the end of that race. Max was nursing that sucker home. He probably would have finished in 6th anyway if he didn't have the 20 seconds of penalties. That's my judgment or assessment of Verstappen's race pace. This is backed up by my man Jonathan Noble at Autosport. Shout out to him. He did a great piece on this today, breaking down the race pace relative to the field where Max is at. And if you see the graph over the course of the season and the downward trend of the Red Bull over the course of the season, it's alarming how much Red Bull has fallen off this year.
I mean, I still can't count them out. It is still a lot to ask Norris to close in 47 points in 4 more rounds.
Mm-hmm.
There was a golden opportunity for Norris here because he got the Mexico City front row. He got to start on the second row of the grid, man, and that's usually that's almost the perfect place to start. I'm not going to beat the drum about Lando Norris not a good starter and all that. He at least held his position, but yeah, this was a major, major opportunity for him to gain ground, and I can totally understand why he's cheesed off about it. Brazil's going to be tough. These last few races are tough for him to make any sort of ground. And again, how different would things be if McLaren had made up their mind in the middle of the season? How different would things be if McLaren just showed up at the start of the year with the car that they have now?
Yeah, we'll get into that a little bit more later in terms of the lay of the land championship-wise, but I do agree that this was another missed opportunity for Lando. He openly admitted he didn't get his tyres in the window in qualifying and then played it relatively safe on his final lap because he didn't want to risk not having a competitive time at all. Started P3, which ideally, like you say, is the sweet spot. It's an 800-meter run down to turn 1 at Mexico. It's the longest of the year. You'll want to start third, ideally, and get a nice big old slipstream all the way down to turn 1, and it didn't really work out for Lando in any way. And track position was so important here because once Sainz established himself at the front of the field, he took off. He was so much better on the medium tyre than Leclerc was this weekend, and that's what won him this race. Norris having to recover and be stuck behind Verstappen's car, while at the same time Sainz was just taking off in one of his most impressive F1 drives today. You don't beat Charles Leclerc that convincingly under normal circumstances, but he did. I mean, there's been a lot of rumbling back and forth since this weekend, RJ, about how fair is it. I know a lot of people have been very opinionated on Twitter about Max and whether this is okay, whether they should have increased penalties, whether, we need to change the rule book on overtaking. Like, how do you see?
Do not get me wrong. Like, again, I respect the bit. I like Max Verstappen a lot more than I let on sometimes. Maybe not as much as I did when he was just like coming up through the system of Toro Rosso. But, I don't hate him as much as some. But I also agree that this is not the example that younger drivers down the ladder who were starting their careers in karting, junior formula, club racing, sim racing, whatever, that's not the example that they should take in an ideal world. And I know we had analogs before then. Ayrton Senna, Michael Schumacher, they got shit for it too back when they were around.
I was going to make that point. We're of similar age, RJ. I grew up with Schumacher. I grew up a huge Schumacher fan, and that was my first racing hero. Schumacher drove like a dick on multiple occasions. Do not get it twisted. Adelaide 94, Jerez 97 at a big 2, Rascasse at Monaco in 06. Hell, when I wrote about this on my DRR, the picture I put to describe it was Michael running Rubens Barrichello nearly into the wall at Hungary in 2010 at age 40 in a midfield Mercedes.
ODB, baby.
Michael Schumacher was the definition of old dirty bastard. And yeah, we gave him shit for that too. Max is the modern day version of those drivers. And look, we're partly responsible. I remember to this day when he debuted in 2015 full time and seeing some of his early aggressive moves like the NASA pass at Blanchimont at Spa and Brazil.
Excuse me. IMSA champion Felipe Nasr.
Of course. IMSA champion Felipe Nasr. How could he forget? And just like the lunges he was taking at Brazil. We promoted Verstappen as a breath of fresh air when he first got to F1 for driving this way. Because he was old school, because he was aggressive, because he was completely unafraid and unrepentant to take chances. And it pissed people off back then. That's how he's always been. And I'm shocked people are so surprised that Max is prepared to go to these levels when we have easy examples from not just 3 years ago in 2021, but even this season in Austria, when we saw what he was prepared to do, turning into the braking zone, trying to run Norris 2 wheels off in Austria, braking zone-wise, into that corner, the same place we nicknamed the Verstappen Amendment from 2019 when he did it to Charles Leclerc with 2 laps to go to win that race. This is who Max is. And we're just going to have to accept that. Max is not going to change. Why? Because he's one of the greatest of all time. That's why. He's won 3 consecutive titles. He has 60-plus race wins. There's a good chance he wins number 4 this year. And we are talking about him in a circle Hall of Fame F1 driver.
Even if he retires early, which, every other week it seems like there's a new thing that Max Verstappen gets agitated with about the state of Formula One that makes me think, oh yeah, he's going to walk away by the time he's 30 and do something else.
Yeah. He retires tomorrow. He's basically A-Rod without the steroids. He's an inner circle Hall of Famer. Like, deep in the top 10 of drivers of all time.
And I like the A-Rod comparison too, because like even without the steroids, A-Rod was very eccentric. Let's just say
maybe not the word I'd use, but yes, very, very girl boss.
Okay, Max Verstappen did not like have a portrait of himself as a centaur in his bedroom. He's not that vain like Alex Rodriguez.
No. The girl boss reboot is going well for A1, I must say.
I just wonder, the FIA says they're going to address the guidelines on overtaking, but did they do this before? And look where we are. It doesn't seem like anything's changed. In fact, it's arguably gotten worse.
People are going to take the piss. They're racing drivers. That's what they're paid to do. The whole point of racing drivers are to push the limits of what's possible. And by doing that, they're going to exploit every loophole in the book. I'm just stunned more people don't race like Max does these days. Because the reality is, Max is about the only driver regularly on track in F1 right now that is prepared to test the stewards. Most drivers aren't willingly prepared to go to that level, because I say willingly because a lot of the time it's accidental. I don't think they mean to be aggressive as they are. To borrow a line from Wayne Barnes, the famous rugby referee, the former ex-rugby referee, when turn 7 happened, the quote I said was, "Oh, that's egregious." That was as blatant and stonewall a penalty as you will ever see. And look, I am actually not one of these people. A lot of people were tweeting me about this yesterday saying, well, Dre, should we up the stakes? Should we go to drive-through penalties next, which is the next stage on the ladder of punishment? Do we go to drive-throughs? And I'm saying, well, no. I say no because the precedent's been set. The drivers wanted it to be 10 seconds for a shall we say, a professional foul, like we would say in football. For something like that. And
I mean, yeah, but did they think at the time that somebody was just gonna not make the corner as a defensive tactic?
Well, probably not. That's why it wasn't in the loop. It wasn't in the text when they came up with these guidelines. And again, that's the point of regulations. Somebody figures out a loophole and then they try and close it, and then we play kiss chase about it. And I don't Here's the thing, right? Going back to that Hamilton incident from Silverstone 21 briefly for a second here, that was a 170 mile an hour crash that put Max in the wall at 50 Gs. Now, I know we are meant to punish on the incident, not the outcome, because you don't know what's going to happen the moment you make contact. There's a chance Max saves that car and we all crack on like nothing happened, right? But that was the most egregious driving standards penalty of recent times, in my opinion. You can maybe put the Verstappen brake test in inverted commas at Saudi Arabia later that year in the same kind of ballpark. They were 10-second penalties.
Yeah, and I remember at the time, we don't even have to do retrospective history like the Bucks firing Adrian Griffin and hiring 2 coaches have gone on to be worse.
Very good.
They were saying, that's not enough. It certainly helped that Hamilton went on to... Didn't he go on to win that race?
Which one?
2021 Silverstone.
Yes, he did. Yeah. The red flag bailed him out.
As soon as they clocked that he was going to win, immediately was like, this is not good enough. He should have been part for the race.
With ignoring the very convenient loophole that the red flag that immediately came out afterwards was allowed them to get the car back to pit lane and fix it, because you're allowed to fix a car under red flag conditions. It's not the punishment that was the issue. It was the coincidental nature of a red flag dropping immediately afterwards. Can't predict that. Shit happens. Again, retrospective punishment is shaky, to say the least. like the point is, those penalties in 2021 were 10 seconds. They were as rough as it got, and that was when the standard was generally 5. I don't think we're at a point where drive-through penalties and stop and goes are necessary, because we're going to get to a point where Yuki Tsunoda might, and I'm using names at random, Yuki Tsunoda might run Kevin Magnussen off the road one time. Are we going to say that's a drive-through penalty now?
Well, I mean, it does feel like in a lot of these last 2 races, we're not even giving that much mind to like incidents like this that happen further back in the pack.
Well, yeah, because we'll talk about it a bit later. Lawson v. Perez was very similar. Both dudes running each other off the road, not respecting track limits. Contact was had, damage was held, nothing was done by the stewards. Lawson and Colapinto later on in that race. That went the other way. Colapinto got a 10-second time penalty for defending his line at turn 2, and it just so happened that Lawson's front wing got clattered off. It's inconsistent steering will always rear its ugly head in these scenarios, which does not help anybody. But I don't like if the minimum stake is now drive-through penalty, which is normally around 15 to 20 seconds, depending on track. We're at a point where the punishment no longer fits the crime, quite frankly. And going from 0 to drive-through is a problem that I've had with IndyCar's penalty system for quite some time, because in IndyCar, there's no time penalty system in that series. If you get hit for driving standards, it's a drive-through, or even a stop and hold in some cases. Like, that's a very extreme punishment sometimes for something that, in my opinion, doesn't warrant that level of punishment. The minor penalty is getting phased out, and I don't like that. I know stewards have got degrees of mitigation, but they don't normally apply them very often. That's my fear.
Well, counterpoint, once upon a time, like that was the most minor penalty that you could give out for dangerous driving and avoidable contact. And it's like that in a number of championships. Like the major penalty was stuff like your ass is getting parked for a race. We're not doing the math of penalty points. You did something so egregious, we are parking you.
MotoGP was like that, like late 90s, early 2000s. If you fucked up like that and wrecked somebody else and you were deemed responsible, you were banned. You'd be sacked for a round. I remember that happened to Loris Capirossi back in the 90s. It happened to John Hopkins back in there. Mikoto Tamada took one once. Like, I remember one time he ran Sete Gibernau out at Motegi in 2003, which nowadays might be a long lap penalty. When Tamada did it to Sete Gibernau, Tamada was disqualified. He was taken out of the result. So, yeah, I don't want to go back to those draconian days where it's all or nothing on penalties. We need a degree of mitigation to iron this out. And we have a very flexible rule book, and it should be used. Maybe not that end of the scale, mind you, because I think the stewards got this one right, in my opinion, apart from the penalty points. I think you give him penalty points for turn 7. Turn 4, I could maybe argue was maybe 5 seconds. I still think it was I don't think it was a 10-second penalty, what Max did first time round. But
they wanted to set an example.
And look, I don't like it. I suspect it was a make-up call for last week.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to think like that, because stewards should not be thinking like that. You take every incident in a vacuum. We don't want unconscious bias to start coming into stewarding decisions. But it felt like a make-up call. It felt like a make-up call for last week, because they knew they got the Norris one wrong in Austin. And that's my opinion anyway.
I get it, though. But I mean, also, like, lesser drivers than Max Verstappen had reputations where people were just begging for them to get harsher penalties.
Yeah. Max is not the first. He won't be the last, certainly.
Also, Carlos Sainz won.
Yeah.
Carlos Sainz dominated this race, start to finish. You could even say, like, he colonized this Mexico City track. Lando Norris finished second. Charles Leclerc, we mentioned that tank slapper late in the race. He dropped to third. But I want to talk about the Constructors Champion, because Oscar Piastri did not have a very good day. That started bad because he missed the cut in Q1, which is unthinkable.
Probably Piastri's worst weekend in F1 since he got here.
He could salvage 8th in the Grand Prix, but that was it.
Yeah, qualified, what was it, P16, P17, got back up to 8th in the end, but just didn't look like he had the pace that Lando Norris did this weekend, and Piastri's blowing a bit cold in recent weekends. He's the hype talk about, hey, is Piastri the number one guy? That's probably cooled off a little bit in the last 3 or 4 races.
Let's talk about, though, the lead in the Constructors Championship from McLaren now to Ferrari, because they've jumped Red Bull, 29 points, 4 races left. You don't think, oh my God, is it time, Dre, do we need to start buying bricks? Do we need to start buying brick and mortar? Is it time to run another donation drive? Is it time to get back in touch with the Lord and rebuild the church?
It's like the old gif of the Undertaker rising up out of the casket when no one was expecting. I'm just like, really? We're doing this again? We're being cock-teased here. I say it's wearing a Ferrari shirt, so I can't really say shit right now. I'm wearing the carbon fiber Ferrari shirt from their win at Monza, because I was emotionally affected by Charles Leclerc's victory there. It did things to me. Look, I don't know where Ferrari's suddenly gotten this pace from. They seemingly have got the porpoising issues ironed out of their car, and they're a lot better at low and medium speed corners, to the point where now they've had the fastest race pace car in F1 for the last 2 races. And like, Brazil's going to be interesting this weekend, because Brazil's been resurfaced. There's also a 60% chance of rain on Sunday. The weather might play a role in this. It's apparently a very abrasive new resurface at Brazil, so it's going to be, you can throw out the form book going into Lagos this weekend. If Ferrari wins at Brazil this weekend and they clean sweep the triple header, McLaren's in serious trouble. The problem for McLaren's got 2 problems right now. One, as mentioned many a time, their inconsistency. Like, McLaren has been arguably the most bankable top car in F1 for most of this season now. Probably since maybe Imola, roughly.
Certainly since Miami.
Certainly since Miami. Miami was what, round 6, I want to say? And we're now at round 21.
Yeah. So they've had the best car. I don't know if I would go to call it like the fastest rocket ship ever built in Formula One history, more dominant than the MP414, the FW14B, the F2004, and the RB19 put together. But like, man, it's been the best. And for all of that, they could end up with nothing.
There is a very real possibility that Woking leaves this season with nothing. Norris has got a lot of work to do to win the driver's title at 47 points with 4 to go. It is a sprint weekend at Brazil this weekend. That might help. More points available, could go both ways. We said that about Kota, and it ended up being a disaster for Norris that weekend. Like, that might be the weekend that won Max the title without even realizing it at the time. Brazil, there's a few more points at play. But then look at the constructors. The problem is as well, another problem that people aren't talking about, Piastri is not backing Norris up. Like, when was the last time McLaren had both their cars in contention?
Oh gosh, Singapore?
Piastri was like a distant third that weekend.
So then Monza. So then if it's not that,
it's probably Monza.
It's probably Monza. And that doesn't feel like too long ago, because that was only 4 rounds ago.
But this is the point I'm getting at. They've not been able to get both cars in the window for quite a few weekends now. Now, Baku was a bit more freaky because Norris was hard done by the yellow flag at Baku, but there's always a risk of that during Baku qualifying. It's Baku qualifying. Few things in Formula One are more hazardous, potentially. But McLaren's not getting both cars in the fight. Piastri's gone off the boil a little bit down the stretch. He's not backing Norris up when it comes to performances. Ferrari have had Sainz and Leclerc in contention for both wins they've had since coming back.
Now, do we want to relitigate the Chuck and Chuck pecking order? Do we want to relitigate this?
No, I'm not going there. I'm not dusting open my recycling bin of Hot Takes Wednesday episodes for WTF1 when people kept tweeting me every goddamn week saying, Dre, Sainz is the better driver. No, Sainz is the definition of a Goldilocks driver. He is a Goldilocks driver. Like, the porridge can't be too hot, it can't be too cold, but when it's right, it's excellent. That's Carlos Sainz as a racing driver. Charles Leclerc is still the man at Ferrari. Do not get it twisted on this one. However, I'm glad Sainz has chosen now to find a purple patch. It might just win Ferrari a title on the way out.
Oh, yeah.
Which, by the way, would be their first world title in 16 years.
Since 2008, when they won the Constructors Championship. Back-to-back Constructors Championships, as it turns out. The Drivers' Championship, well, it was theirs for a minute, and then it wasn't. But, yeah, I don't disagree with you there. Like, it's perfectly fine that Carlos Sainz Jr. fills that niche of, like, being constantly a high 80s overall driver. Maybe not in the 90s, but high 80s every year, man.
That's okay. There's room for that. In a sense.
It's the reason why Williams sprung for him.
If anything, it's probably part of the reason why Ferrari's been able to coexist so peacefully between Leclerc and Sainz for their time together. There was mostly a clear number one driver by accident in their setups because Sainz was good the first year and then Leclerc's kind of taken over ever since. In any sense,
I mean, did we think like outside of like the most hardcore Brazilian F1 fans in the early 2000s, did we think that like Rubens Barrichello was the better driver than Michael Schumacher? No. But Rubens Barrichello was good enough to win on days when Michael Schumacher just didn't have it.
You don't fluke 11 I think Rubens actually had 13, if memory serves, but it's double digits. You don't fluke that many wins in F1 by accident. Like, Ferrari's got a very fast race. Like, in terms of race pace, they have an excellent car right now on Sundays, and they have a more balanced team than what McLaren has right now. Piastri needs to find his form again. When Piastri is great, he can give Norris 99% of what Lando can give you. But he hasn't had a good day since he won at Baku. Not a great day. Monza's the exception, really. Like, Piastri was good enough to win that race. McLaren was just caught hot dogging on strategy more than anything else. But Ferrari's in the window. If they win Brazil and they can get both cars up there on the podium again, McLaren's in serious trouble. I think there is a real chance McLaren leaves this season with nothing, which, given how good their car was, I think is unacceptable for Zach Brown and Andrea Stella to have that conversation because they were good enough to win at least one of these championships. How do you get neither?
I don't know. Go back and ask Ron Dennis, Fernando Alonso, and Lewis Hamilton back in 2007. I know circumstances were different, but it's on that level. It's on that level.
It would be a heist if Ferrari pulled this off. Given they spent 3 months of this season doing jack shit between the summer break, but they've hit the ground hard during this flyaway block, and it might just win them the title.
We got people on our Discord community, which if you need an invite, if you're a supporter, go ahead and hit us up for it anywhere at motorsport_101. Who still have usernames alluding to the time where Ferrari couldn't get their upgrade package right. And now they could win the World Constructors Championship. That's crazy to me. Although maybe not the wildest development of the Constructors Championship. We got a couple notes to clean up. Liam Lawson and Sergio Perez racing for one another's job, probably.
This is... All I will say about that clash was both men knew who the other one was and acted accordingly.
Yeah, like Perez, like in the middle of the race, I think it was on 41, like 39, 40, 41. At some point, he just parks it through every corner of the stadium section, backs off like 2 seconds. Like rolling roadblock style to keep Liam Lawson behind him.
Yeah, and
Lawson responds in turn later in the race by opening up the DRS, flying by, and telling Sergio Perez that he is number one.
He's going for first, said Cleland, etc. If you know, you know, the Super Touring Power Days, so to speak. But no, that was like the second chapter, because the first one was when they hit each other early on in the race, when Perez was trying to come back from his essentially back of the field start. Got a great getaway until you found out he actually moved like 2 feet out of his box, which didn't help either. Got a time penalty for that one, but was getting towards the points, and then he sends it down the inside of turn 4 on Lawson. That was a gap that was always going to close. He locks up a little bit in doing so. There's contact in the middle between turns 4 and 5. Lawson then rams Perez off the road on the exit of turn 4. It damages Perez's side pod to the point where it completely cripples his car and ruins his race. Then the aforementioned incident in the stadium, like RJ alluded to, so Lawson gives him the finger as he overtakes and drives past him on the way through. And in the end, both men were pretty salty about it afterwards. I suspect Lawson got a good telling off from Marco and Horner about it. In fact, there was a video of him waiting to be scolded by Horner in the back of the hospitality unit, because Lawson would go on to apologize, and Perez would say, this man needs to humble himself. Now, I know a lot of people were very quick to dunk on Checo after his horrible weekend, another horrible Mexico weekend, and I get it.
Can I confess something, Dre?
Go for it.
As a year 2 Sergio Perez investor, I'm buying in when the stock is just about to get hot. I have not had less fun being a Sergio Perez fan than in these last couple of years, man. I don't know what to say, man. When they're pitting you for a fastest lap attempt with no confidence you even pull it off, I don't know. I respect Lawson for not backing down to anybody. He did this with Alonso at Coda. He did this with Perez in Mexico City. His own race. He got a good telling off, and I always wondered what it'd be like if Liam Lawson fans, who we know the craziest of which are so aggrieved about everything, they think the world is entirely against their guy, would match up against one of the other most rabid fan bases in the sport.
Yeah, because Lawson also messed with Colapinto, and then the Colapinto fans let him have it on Instagram afterwards. You don't fuck with Argentina. Ask the Augustine Canapino crowd about that one. Not good. We do not endorse this behavior, but
but then again, Kelvin van der Linde running in as a special guest referee, I think that would be funny.
I would watch. I'm not going to lie to you. I would watch that shit. But no, that was both men knowing who the other man was and acting accordingly in a sword throwing contest with their race suits unzipped. They knew exactly what they were doing on that one. Perez is desperate, and he was acting like a desperate man. He openly, on a grander scale, Perez openly admitted that he's had a terrible season this year. I don't disagree with him. He's been very honest about his shortcomings this year, his shortcomings of the car, his struggles to adapt as the development cycle has gotten worse. He even alluded to, during the drivers' parade, that he talked about feeling like it might be his last one, because the way he worded asking how the home crowd feels, I think he was talking a lot in the past tense, where it was like, and even his dad went on Instagram to describe it and said it was his final Mexican Grand Prix. So it's is the overwhelming sound in the room here that this really is it for Checo?
I mean, when Christian Horner is going out with all of his graphs and telemetry and shit out in the media session, and then also saying pretty much we got to consider it in the post-race debrief, it almost feels like it is winding down to the end, which brings me to another point. If Perez steps away, This is going to mean that a couple things are going to happen. One, it likely means either Liam Lawson or Yuki Tsunoda is going to step up to Red Bull. It means there's going to be a seat at VCarb that would be open, and apparently Franco Colapinto might be the number one commodity.
James Vowles was very quick to not talk about a potential driver hire when he was asked about it on the Sunday after Mexico, which, given it's James Vowles, is a surprise. For if you know, you know.
Where's the Mark Henry button?
Sexual baby. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, it was that was a thing. Horner said himself, we'd be doing a bad job as team boss if we didn't at least explore the possibility. Apparently, the hurdle is funding because Sergio Perez is very close to Carlos Slim. Carlos Slim brings a lot of marketing money to the table. It's not a huge issue because Colapinto also has backing from one of Carlos Slim's parent or subsidies companies. But there's a lot of money that would have to change hands, and that's always where things get fuzzy when it comes to contract status. But there is a lot of rumored talk that Red Bull are strongly considering making a play for Franco Colapinto at RB because the overriding sentiment is apparently Isaac Hadjar, who is 4 points off the Formula 2 championship lead this year, is apparently not ready for F1, but Franco Colapinto definitely is. I don't know.
When you look at it, when you just look at it, the F2 standings, like, yeah, that makes sense. But also, like, Franco Colapinto has made the most of this opportunity. Do you know he's not finished a race lower than 12th all season? And look, I know what some of you are thinking. VCarb is making the same mistake that they did with Nick DeVries because of one hot race. That was one race measured against Nicholas Latifi, who we all knew was like the 20th best driver on the grid every single time he rocked up to the track.
Mm-hmm.
Franco Colapinto's sample is larger and a variety of tracks, and he's doing it against an Alex Albon, who is the de facto number one guy at the team. Colapinto is doing so well that people are starting to think that Alex Albon is reverting back to his 2020 standard at Red Bull. And if you know anything about Alex Albon's 2020 standard, it was a standard that was so high that he was promoted to DTM. And wait a second.
Yeah. We almost thought he was done in F1 entirely. Drivers rarely get second chances in this game sometimes, and that example.
Drivers rarely get first chances.
Right.
I mean, you listen to Felipe Drugovich finally admitting, like, hey, maybe I should have been more open with my racing options instead of waiting for something to come along and Aston Martin. Why he did.
You joined an Aston Martin development call with Lance Stroll and Fernando Alonso, who's going to be going into his age 44 season next year.
Happy 400th Grand Prix entry, Fernando Alonso.
He celebrated it with a quick DNF. Couldn't wait to get home. He brought the tacos with him on the flight. But no, it's as someone that has followed the juniors for quite some time, it's a mess. Call it. Well, I don't see how anyone can not call it a mess at this point. Because the man I feel sorry for in all of this is Gabriel Bortoleto right now. Gabriel Bortoleto is about to do the Formula... he's got a good chance of doing the Formula 3, Formula 2 double. Back-to-back years. We would normally roll out the red carpet and line him up as a A-plus tier prospect if Gabby Bortoleto was going to do something like that. The Piastri, going straight through the junior ranks. Yeah, the Leclerc, the George Russell, going straight through the tiers. There's a 90% chance he's not going to make the grid.
Or if he does, he'll go to a team that's about as openly tanking for wind tunnel time as you could get in Team Sauber.
Because Sauber's in no hurry to announce a driver because they know they're the last seat left. They can take as long as they need. They have all the aces. when they're umming and ahhing about whether they want to tie down Valtteri
They're
Bottas.
holding all the aces, and it's just like 7s and 2s, and you have a sub club card somewhere in. They ain't holding anything, man.
Yeah, it's like playing a Balatro hand. You've used all your discards, and you still haven't hit that flush yet. It's not looking great for you out here, buddy. And it's deeply unfortunate because it just goes to show you how broken this ladder is. It doesn't make sense at this point. We went from the first time ever in F1's 75-year championship history as a world title that we had the entire grid retained from one season going into the next. And then we've gone back the other way again from a really risk-averse grid to Ollie Behrman cameoing in Saudi Arabia, Franco Colapinto doing a very, very good job subbing in for Logan Sargent at Williams, and people realizing, oh shit, we can take chances on these youngsters again. Even though we had the Liam Lawson sample size last year when he did 5 Grand Prix and 4 of them were really good. We've gone the other way again, and now there's not enough seats to go around. As Jason points out, Mick Doohan's getting a crack in an Alpine next year. Sorry, Jack Doohan, I should say, sorry.
Dude, Mick Doohan getting a seat at Alpine would be crazy.
That would be funny. That would be crazy. Mick, I wouldn't do that to you. But no, we've gone the other way again. We've had an explosion of rookies where now we're guaranteed Antonelli, Behrman, Doohan all on the grid next year, and there's now seemingly a far above 0% chance Colapinto may join them.
And the thing is, of the 4 names that you mentioned, none of them will be Formula 2 champions. Antonelli has a snowball's chance in hell of closing the deal in the last couple rounds, but I don't think it's going to happen.
No.
Behrman had his chance this year, but then more important things got in the way. Colapinto got called up early, same deal. Jack Doohan probably had his chances, but was never a thing. Because we all realize now that quality control just isn't there. So you got to use you got to evaluate these guys on other means. But I always wonder, how far do you stretch the charity of Formula 2's bad quality control? Because the same benefit of the doubt that we were given Antonelli and Behrman with no hesitations, we were really hesitant to extend that to Doohan when he got announced or Colapinto when he got announced. Mm-hmm. How far does that stretch? Do people think that Bortoleto is just a good engine merchant? Which would be really, really messed up.
The fact it sucks because the problem is he drove for Virtuosi, who was good right out of the box in Formula 2 of this brand new car. From round 1, they were great. And that people, I think, if they were looking at more cynical ways to criticize Bortoleto, I suspect that would be the angle they would use, is that their car was great right out of the box in F2, and the usual big hitters like Prima were slow to get the ball rolling. Whereas Invicta, Campos, even Rodin started out quite well. Like Enzo Fittipaldi won
one half of Rodin started off very well.
But even Miata was running top 10, had top 10 level speed on quite a few occasions early doors.
But even he was admitting to the Japanese press, I don't know if I've got all the horses. And compounding that is that he's having to learn a whole brand new set of tracks. And yeah, sure, he spent a lot of time in iRacing, but that will get you so far.
No, it's never the same as the real thing. It's a messy system where we want certain people you want to give the benefit of the doubt to, certain people you don't want to give the benefit of the doubt to. Formula 2 is no longer, in my opinion, a nailed on, open and shut case of talent evaluation. And that's before you throw in the usual qualms of racing series, bad luck, reliability, engine factors, sheer dumb luck.
But now it's the only way up for a lot of these drivers.
Yeah, there's no other viable alternative because no one's looking at IndyCar.
No one's looking at IndyCar. No one's really looking at Super Formula.
Alex Palou had the greatest IndyCar season in modern history last year, and it barely got a sniff in terms of an F1. It's we'll consider Alex Palou, but there was no concrete offer by the time the year had gone by. And that was a man who spent an entire IndyCar season treating 8th place as the floor. So, Jason's quite right in our chat as well. Academy stashing talents, often not even looking at the results, even so they're not used against them. There's a lot of politics involved in this shit as well. So when you put all that in a blender, hit the cappuccino button or hit the frappe button and start blending, what do you get? It's guesswork now at this point. And
excuse me, Dre, could you remake this coffee? It tastes like garbage. I swear they used to make this coffee so much better like 5, 10, 15 years ago. Now it just tastes like ass.
Until you find out we actually put the we actually put the Antonelli syrup in there, and now it tastes wonderful because we want it to taste nice. It's all over the place, and I don't like it. I want to have a clear and concise way of evaluating talent to get into Formula One. And I know that's often a pipe dream at the best of times, but it's never been more confusing than what it is right now.
I think it would just help if, like, Mechachrome gets their shit together. And if they can't, find a technical partner that can build powertrains that can. I understand that's going to be tough because they're vested interest in it, but maybe it's something to consider. I don't know. Sorry for the tangent. Colapinto to RB would be cool. It'd be cool if it happens. We'll see.
Feel bad for Hadja. That's just them. Like, what again? Didn't go one and done. Therefore, not good enough. What more can you do? Honestly, like anything less than S tier is now getting severe question marks. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that at this point. Anyway. Doubleheader this weekend. Formula One at the Brazilian Grand Prix. As mentioned earlier, track's been resurfaced, pit lane's been resurfaced, as well as a 60% chance to rain on Sunday. Sprint weekend as well. Could be a very interesting weekend with 4 to go on the F1 calendar. But the last round before we take a couple of weeks off there. MotoGP this weekend as well. The Malaysian Grand Prix at Sepang. Just 2 rounds to go on that one. We'll talk a little bit more about that in greater detail in our next episode. But Martin, Bagnaia, 17 points between them. No one else in mathematical contention now. The rematch is officially on with 2 rounds left. Malaysian Grand Prix this weekend. Get up early for it if you're in the UK. That'll do it for this episode of Motorsport 101. I've been Dre Harrison. He's been RJ O'Connell. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll catch you guys next time. Sayonara.
Later, y'all.
Kind of messy, saved. Wait, that's not how it meant to go.